Not yet.
Not yet?
No. I'm recusing on the 2 Newport films, so you know.
Test. Can someone speak to me, please?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Try it again.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kate. I'm talking about the people inside the chambers. Can you hear me
Okay.
inside the chambers? Can you hear me inside the chambers? Hello? 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 You've got audio here? Can you hear them? Wyatt? Hello? Tom's fine. That's try again. Why isn't mine picking up? Talking to me. Well, I cannot hear this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on now.
You should be able to. Kate, can you hear?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Laura, can you hear me? Laura? No.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Kate, can you hear all of us?
I can. I'm recusing for consent calendar A1 and 2.
Zoom is not getting into the Zoom. Is there mute in Zoom? Because this.
All right, so we'll have to do that, Susan.
I already didn't have.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got some, right? Yeah, that's what I am too. And I'm trying. Huh? Yeah. No, about 8. You know, at different times though. But you know, it was worth the shot to try it.
1, 2.
Good. Good. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm only going to people I know. You know, I'm not just going to anybody.
Tom said he's getting it wrong now.
I mean, do we want to use our cell phones at this point and just zoom in? I could use my cell phone. I think that they can hear us now. Kate, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah. She can hear us. Yep. Okay, so I think that's when they figure that out.
Yeah, yeah. Too long.
Do we restart the attendance?
Yay.
Okay, I think let's start again. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Jamie Bova,
Here.
Lynn Underwood Saley,
Here.
Catherine E. Leonard,
Here.
Angela McCalla,
Here.
Justin S. McLaughlin,
Here.
Jean Marie Napolitano,
Here.
Susan D. Taylor.
Here.
There's the quorum present, Madam Chair.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So a couple things. Everyone on the dais, we've been advised to make sure we talk very close to the microphone so that we're captured. And for everyone out in the virtual world, there is a couple second delay between when we speak and you hear it. So just if there's a little bit of awkwardness or delay there, just bear with us. So we have the Citizens Forum first on the docket. And if there is anyone who would like to speak at the Citizens Forum regarding anything that's not addressed in the docket, You can raise your hand, and you can either raise your hand by clicking raise hand in Zoom, or if you're on your phone, you can press *9. And a reminder that you are limited to 3 minutes. And the clerk, or I think it's the clerk, will be able to unmute you to allow you to speak.
Yes, I think Bonnie Niskern, can you hear us?
I'm trying to unmute myself. Did that work?
We can hear you.
Great.
Can you please identify yourself with your name and address for the record?
Yes, it's Bonnie Niskern. I live at 44 Catherine Street in Newport.
Please continue.
So as the council knows, I was very concerned over the weekend with the enforcement of the mask requirement. On Monday, I got the strong feeling that the council felt a bit powerless to do anything further than educate. So I contacted the governor's office, and I also spoke to the Department of Health. The Department of Business Regulation called me back. The governor's office called me back today and requested additional information. And I will forward to you, to the council members, the package that I sent them late this afternoon. The cover is a letter to Governor Raimondo. I'd like to read parts of it to you, trying to keep it short. The weekend of July 4th, I made my usual trip to the farmers market in North End, then proceeded down Broadway, America's Cup, and onto Thames Street, headed for the Coffee Guys. Turning onto Thames, I was shocked to see it packed with barefaced tourists, most not even carrying a mask. I grabbed my camera from a mount on the dash and started taking pictures. In 3 minutes, I had 14 photos of groups of people, 2, 3, 4 people each, without masks. That was Saturday. I believe it was that afternoon, I contacted the city manager by cell phone, dropped a letter in the city hall drop box to the city manager, and then sent an email to the entire city council. These documents are all attached. I heard back from my ward counselor, who explained that the city manager, Joe Nicholson, had decided to focus on education rather than enforcement. It's clear at this point that every American knows about masks and their function, and if they are not wearing one, it is a choice, not of ignorance, but of arrogance. I also spoke to the police off the record, and they are as concerned as I and my fellow residents are. But they have their marching orders. I did not see a single officer on the beat during my short drive down Thames Street, either Saturday or the next day, Sunday, by the way. Now I was curious, so the next day, Sunday, July 5th, in the early afternoon, I drove again down Thames Street. Even worse, 23 photos in 5 minutes. Multiply that by 12, so you get the gist. 5 times 12 is 60 minutes. And you have 276 groups of people who are not wearing masks, possibly infecting each other within 1 hour and bringing those infections back to Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York in 1 hour. Newport, Rhode Island is not safe. It is now part of a national problem. I see a more truthful Visitors Bureau ad. Visit Newport and take home a free case of COVID-19. This is not the right way to restart the economy. We need your help here, Governor. We need help with enforcement.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. And we will look forward to receiving your package. But we have hit your 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next, there's someone who's identified as concerned citizen. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, hello. My name is Reverend Reeford, and I am a resident of Newport, Rhode Island. I live on Farewell Street. Can you hear me?
A little bit. It's a little difficult. It's kind of garbled.
Okay. I will try to make this brief. However, I am addressing the council because I live on Farewell Street, and over the 4th of July weekend, we had numerous instances of fireworks going off between Cobble Street and the senior housing. I actually live across the street from there. Additionally, additionally, there has been a steady stream of traffic, people traveling down Farewell Avenue like it's an interstate highway. There has never been any presence of traffic enforcement. I see it in every other neighborhood where there's a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and I see police officers enforcing it. There is a steady increase, additionally, of trucks. And I'm not talking a UPS truck. I'm talking 18-wheelers that are delivering to the local liquor store on the corner, or delivering to White Horse Tavern, traveling down Fairwell at excessive speed. That is a hazard to that neighborhood. There isn't any reason I can find that they need to go down Fairwell Street from White Horse Tavern to the light when they can take America's Cup Highway. I've been awoken many, many times in the middle of the night with these traffic incidences. It is very problematic. We need to do something. I don't know what else to do. I've placed phone calls, so I'm addressing the council, and I'm asking them to take this on the docket and to get our traffic supervisor out there. Speed bumps, ticket people, it is very prevalent on the weekends and late hours. And I'm asking that the city council take this up, please.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, were you able to get her name? Could you please repeat your name, ma'am?
Yes, Reverend Recore, R-E-C-O-R-E.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? Your first name again?
Sure. Reverend Recore, R-E-C-O-R-E.
Address?
And your address?
Is 34 Fairwell Avenue.
34 Farewell Avenue. Okay. Received. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
The consent calendar.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent calendar in its entirety with the exception of two items, A1 and A2. Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion on the council? Hearing none, I will do does the planning director wish to speak?
I would like this opportunity to speak, Mayor, regarding the communication from the planning board.
Please, thank you.
First, as the administrative officer of the planning board, I'd like to apologize for how this correspondence was originally before the council, and to ask you to please accept the communication from the planning board as submitted tonight. This past week, the planning board subcommittee had the opportunity to meet with the city manager regarding the communication. The complexity of this issue is now better understood, and how the need for public outreach to the business community and residents, consultation with relevant city staff, and research into best practices is essential to the success of any slow street plan. As the city moves towards social and economic recovery from the pandemic, the planning board subcommittee is looking to be of assistance and to continue this effort by research and outreach, including possibly participating in any future COVID recovery survey efforts. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the council? Hearing none, I will do a roll call vote on the item. Councillor Segley? Aye. Councillor Leonard?
Aye.
Councillor McCalla? Aye. Councillor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Councillor Napolitano? Aye. Councillor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the application by Newport Film to host a drive-in documentary film on July 16th, 2020, at the location of the Newport Grand Casino parking lot.
Second. There is a motion and a second, and these items, Counselor Leonard is recusing herself from. Is there any discussion on the council? Hearing none, I will do a roll call vote. Counselor Segley. Aye. Counselor McCalla. Aye. Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes 6-0.
And Madam Chair, I move that we approve the application by Newport Film to hold a drive-in documentary film on August 6th, 2020 at the Newport Grand Casino parking lot.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the council? Hearing none, I will call the roll call vote. Counselor Segley. Aye. Counselor McCalla. Aye. Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes 6-0.
Application for a Vittling license expansion, 22 Washington Square Inc., DBA Bar Chino, 22 Washington Square, to expand the licensed premises into 24 Washington Square in conjunction with the liquor license expansion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve this application for an expansion of the Vittling license to include 24 Washington Square.
Second.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council? Is there anyone from the public that would like to be heard? Hearing none, I will hold the roll call vote. Counselor Segley. Aye. Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla. Aye. Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
Application for a new sidewalk cafe, 22 Washington Square Inc., DBA Bar Chino, 24 Washington Square, in conjunction with liquor license expansion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve this application for Sidewalk Cafe, a new license at 24 Washington Square.
Second.
Second. There is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the council? Is there anyone from the public that would like to be heard? Hearing none, I will call the vote. Counselor Segley. Aye. Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla. Aye. Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
Application for a Vittling license, new location, Radish Patch LLC, DBA Vieste Vino Wine Bar, Yagi Noodle, and the Cafe, 580 Thames Street, units B101, B102, B103, and B104, in conjunction with liquor license transfer.
I move that we continue this item, and it will be continued. The motion will be to continue the liquor license transfer as well because it was not properly noticed. So I move that we continue to July 22nd.
Second.
Second.
It would actually need to be August 12th.
August 12th,
With the
okay.
notice requirements.
I will make the motion for August 12th. So the motion is to continue this item until August 12th because it was not properly noticed.
Yeah, the Crispy and City Solicitor, the issue is really with the liquor license, which requires notice to abutters. We discovered that it wasn't properly, everyone wasn't properly notified, so the liquor license definitely has to be continued, so we're continuing the VIT license as well.
Okay, thank you. Did I get a second on that motion?
Yes.
A second, thank you. I will call the vote on the second, or excuse me, on the continuance. Counselor Segley. Aye. Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla. Aye. Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
application for a new entertainment license, Class A indoors, Kinsley's Ltd, DBA Newport Blues Cafe, 286 Thames Street, first and second floors. This is the second hearing.
This is a public hearing on an entertainment license at Newport Blues Cafe. Is there anyone from the public that would like to be heard? And again, if you're on your phone, you can press *9, or if you're in Zoom, you can press the raise hand button.
Mayor Bova, Matt Lees, representing the applicant. We're available to answer any questions the council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lees. Is there discussion on the Councilor Leonard?
I just have a question. I brought it up last time, and this is, I believe, the second reading. And the applicant agreed that he would have doors and windows closed for entertainment. So I just want to put that in there.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you so much.
Is there any further discussion on the council? Hearing none, I move that we close the close the public hearing and approve. Second. I will call the roll call vote. Councilor Segley. Aye. Councilor Leonard.
Aye.
Councilor McCalla. Aye. Councilor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano. Aye. Councilor Taylor. Aye. Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
A resolution honoring former Mayor Paul L. Gaines Sr.
I make a motion that we continue this item to the July 22nd meeting. The family of former Mayor Paul Gaines will be here to accept the resolution, and we will present them with a copy of it then.
Second.
I will do the roll call vote. Councilor Segley. Aye. Councilor Leonard.
Aye.
Councilor McCalla. Aye. Councilor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano.
Aye.
Councilor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
A resolution regarding short-term rentals.
This is a resolution that was introduced by Councilor McCalla, so I'll allow her to introduce and make the motion.
Sure. So this resolution really just came from, oh, sorry. I'm just going to read the resolution for clarification. So whereas the City Council on June 24th, 2020 did pass on second reading amendments to the zoning code, including ordinances dealing with so-called short-term rentals. By memorandum dated March 3rd, 2020, the Planning Board did recommend to the Council passage of zoning amendments. And whereas in said memorandum, the Planning Board also noted that in its study and review of the proposed ordinances, certain issues raised were worthy of further study and review, which includes issues concerning sticker parking, visitor passes issued to guest houses, transient guest facilities being allowed in the limited business district by special use permit, and a renewal process for the special use permit issued for guest houses. Therefore, be it resolved that the council refer to the Planning Board for further study and review with respect to the above issues outlined in its March 3rd, 2020 memorandum to the council, and provide to the council and city administration such recommendations, if any, it deems advisable for further action. I make a motion to
second. Yeah. There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council?
Madam Chair.
Councilor Leonard.
I brought this section up too when we originally on March 3rd discussed on the meeting, I think it was June 24th, that we passed it. On the issue of on the meeting, I think it was parking, 24th, visitors passes and guest passes. And the issue I too was concerned about. And I think that in terms of those elements, which seem to be more prolific now that summer is here, I think that Counselor McCalla put in a good resolution that should or could move forward, asking the planning board to consider a little further study on those specific elements.
Is there further discussion on the council?
Madam Chair,
Councilor McLaughlin?
I would just ask Councilwoman McCall if she would consider adding a date in her resolve so that the city administration has a sense of when we would like to see them bring something back to us, or the planning board bring something back to us.
Yeah, I'd agree to that. I just, what date were we thinking?
Well, why don't we ask the Director of Planning? We have Ms. Reynolds on the line. Ms. Reynolds, do you have an opinion on how long you would think it would take for the planning board to be able to review something like this?
I think that we are, as you know, very busy with a lot of pending projects coming up right now. And I would say, what would you think would be a reasonable response amount of time?
Why don't we say 2 months? And if you guys are not able to give us feedback by then we'll revisit it.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Okay.
So I make a motion to amend, I'm sorry. Oh, I make a motion to amend the resolution to let it further be resolved that the city will come back in 2 months' time with a lack of a better term, or resolution.
Maybe at the very end and report back by September, the end of, by August 31st to the city administration.
If I may jump in, our first meeting in September is on the 9th.
Yes.
So I just
If you want to
suggest,
coincide with a council meeting, that's fine. So and report back by September 9th
Okay.
of 2020.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
So I would like to amend the resolution to reflect, let it further be resolved. And report back by September 9th, 2020. Second.
There is a motion and a second on the amendment. Is there any discussion on the proposed amendment? Hearing none, I will do the roll call vote. Councilor Stegley? Aye. Councilor Leonard?
Aye.
Councilor McCalla?
Aye.
Councilor McLaughlin?
aye.
Councilor Napolitano?
Aye.
Councilor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The amendment passes. Is there discussion on the council on the resolution as amended? I would just like to thank Councilor McCalla for introducing this. I thought they were good topics when the planning board outlined them in their memorandum to us, and I'm glad that we're moving this forward to them to have them study further and just overall keep studying and working on how short-term rentals affect our neighborhoods. I will call the roll call vote on the resolution as amended. Councilor Stegley? Aye. Councilor Leonard?
Aye.
Councilor McCalla?
Aye.
Councilor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano?
Aye.
Councilor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
A resolution regarding traffic safety.
This is another resolution that was introduced by Councilor McCalla, so I give the floor to Councilor McCalla to introduce.
Okay. So I will read parts of it. Whereas Melbourne Road, Girard Avenue, and Hillside Avenue are identified in the city's comprehensive land use plan as primary thoroughfares that collect traffic from local residential roads and guide it to the high-capacity arterial streets. And whereas the aforementioned streets and Leal Terrace in the same vicinity are experiencing increased levels of vehicular traffic particularly commercial vehicles, and increased reports of speeding incidences at a time when there are also increases in pedestrian and bicycle activity. And whereas the school zones of both East Bay, Met School, and Pell Elementary School within and connecting to this area have the potential to see an increase in pedestrian, bicyclist, and single car traffic due to the changes of how students get to school during the COVID-19 pandemic. And a transportation master plan will be developed in the near future, but immediate action to increase safety for all modes of travel on these streets must be taken. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the city administration shall explore and implement short-term solutions, including but not limited to speed bumps, speed humps, increased visibility of crosswalks, speed limits, crosswalks, sharing roads with bicycle, and adding and changing placement of signage indicating no through traffic on Wheel Terrace. And let it further be resolved that the city will come back to the council for an updated report by August 31st, the latest. Madam Chair, I actually wanted to take this time to actually write an amendment towards.
Can you make the motion to pass first and then we'll,
I make a motion to pass the resolution.
Second.
there's a motion and a second, Counselor McCall.
I'd like to actually amend the date that stated August 31st to August 1st, because as I previously mentioned, because the impact of COVID that it's having, our schools are also having to think about how our students are going to create safe passage. And so I would actually like to move that date up for August 1st in order to do that.
Thank you, Counselor McCalla. Is there a second? I'll second for the purpose of discussion, and to say we may want to just say August 12th because that's our first council meeting.
Okay.
August 12th is the first council meeting we have in August, and August 1st is a Sunday, and so I think that will give the staff about 4 weeks to work on it, and then they can come back to us on August 12th.
Okay, I agree.
So
I make a motion to amend the date of the last resolve to reflect August 12th and not August 31st.
Second, is there discussion on the proposed amendment? Counselor Leonard?
I have a discussion on the amendment itself.
Okay. What is there?
First of all, I can say that I don't think that it's realistic to ask staff to come back even by August 12th. And in looking at the resolution, I know they're well-intentioned. The resolve says that the city administration shall explore and implement short-term solutions. Well, I can understand the city administration exploring, but to implement it would create policy, and staff does not create policy, the council does. So I would first of all say that I think the word implement is not really something that can happen at this point. I can understand the word explore. Also, in terms of this resolution, if we're going to look at safety and speeding, I think this is a city issue, and we have always been told on city council that it's not allowed. I think they call it the highway regulation, federal highway regulations or something, that speeding, speed bumps are not allowed on on streets. And this resolution, in fact, is calling for a study that I think takes more time. And if you're going to talk about one or two streets, you may as well, I think, add in my ward, Harrison Avenue, Ruggles Avenue. Ruggles is a school district street. And I understand the speeding, I understand the issues, but I don't think that studying something for a little over a month and trying to implement it is at all practical. I don't think that the costs are really discussed on how to do it, whether it's allowed or not. If we want the city administration to come back to us with a discussion of what is allowed and what isn't, I'm fine with that, but not to implement something that I think is not possible in a short period of time and may in fact be not allowed or illegal.
Madam
Councilor
Chair.
McCallum.
So the intention of this resolution, again, is, as you, Kate, as you stated, is to explore. The reality of the situation is I looked at this resolution as a form of short-term, something that would be short-term, because understanding that the master transportation plan may have a longer-term solution that might take longer. But the reality of the situation is that understanding that we have a very high concentration of families that live here. And I can't tell you how many phone calls, emails, etc., of people, of families that are really concerned specifically within those stated areas, because there is different modes of transportation that happen. There's lots of walkers, there's lots of bikers. The kids do not have a safe place to really get from point A to point B. And I said kids, but I really mean the community in itself. And so for me, I'm looking at this resolution. You're right, Kate. Is this the solution for the be all? Maybe not, but something needs to happen because it's a safety issue. We've already had an 8-year-old little boy get hit, and he got rushed to the hospital. He almost died. Like, that stuff really happened around that neighborhood. So I'm just asking for your support in this because, again, to me, this feels like we need to be thinking more safely. This is a safety issue.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Leonard, I will allow a rebuttal, but there is more comments that are wanted on the council. So I'm going to call on Councilor Taylor and then we can get to you. Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. I'm a little bit puzzled by your description of the language, Councilor Leonard, because to my mind, tonight, the council will be setting the policy, which would be that we want improved safety on the streets named in this resolution. That's the policy, and that's what we're asking the city administration to do. When it comes to whether the best solution might be a speed bump or a speed hump or crosswalks or visibility of existing crosswalks, that's what we leave to the city administration and staff. They have the expertise on this. They understand, as you mentioned, what is allowed and what works and what doesn't work. And so my thought is that we're passing this tonight to state our policy, and we're leaving the feasibility and the implementation up to the staff. I do agree with you that getting these features installed by April or August 12th is an ambitious timeline, but I don't see a problem with our, I don't think that the staff is setting policy if they implement our desire for greater safety.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Segley.
I understand Councilor
Segley, I'm sorry. Could you
concerns,
directly?
considering the fact that someone was hit, and I certainly am sympathetic to that. I'm going to support this to explore, certainly not to implement, though. I think we need to change the wording in the resolve, but I think as we move forward with the master transportation plan, perhaps this could be a little model as to how we would move through the city through with safety measures and how we can go about making the streets safer. So I would be sort of curious to see what would happen and what could be done within the Department of Transportation standards, and perhaps we could implement them in the master transportation plan. So I do think that we need to strike the word implement from the resolve and go with explore for now. I mean, perhaps that before the school starts, perhaps some things can be implemented, some short-term strategies can be implemented, but I just don't see speed bumps and crosswalks and all of that, you know, being implemented by that time. So I'd like to see this maybe as a little pilot program for the city to see what is possible.
Okay. Is there further discussion? Councillor McLaughlin?
I've been told to eat this so you can hear me. I would say that one member of the public tells me that they cannot hear Kate on the Zoom feed. So when I look at the resolve, I see there are three parts to it. One, it has some solutions which precede a recitation of problems, and then there's Leal Terrace. And having looked at Leal Terrace, I can see where, you know, that's something that needs to be addressed, and I'm not sure how we do it. You can put up signs saying no through street, but everybody in Newport will know that it goes all the way through. So that may not be the answer that you want, but I recognize it's a narrow street, and anything you can do to keep people from going down it. For instance, when they come to the end of Evans, if there was something that said do not enter across the street so people didn't go down Leal, but I'm not sure how you're going to fix that, but I agree that's a problem. When you talk about, you identify some problems. You have a problem of visibility of crosswalks. You have a problem with speed limits. Perhaps there's a problem with the placement of crosswalks. And there's the problem with sharing the road with bicycles. You know, these are bigger issues than I think we're going to solve in 4 weeks, but I do agree that the administration should be looking into them, and we shouldn't have to wait for a transportation master plan to come up to problems to deal with this. You know, we have a uniform speed limit in the city. If we need a lower speed limit in that part of the city, that's going to be something we're going to do separately here, because we won't do that with just saying we're going to do it tonight. So I support your initiative. I agree with Councilor Segley that, you know, leaving the word implement in right now leaves a suggestion that the city should run out and put in speed humps and speed bumps. And you might hear from Bill Riccio that those aren't necessarily the way to fix the problem, but we perhaps need a better definition of what the problem is and make sure we come up with the right solutions. But I certainly feel that we should be directing the city administration to look into what the root causes of these problems are and start working on solutions so that we don't wait till school opens to deal with them. So if we take out the word implement, I don't know that we're taking any teeth out of this. We're just providing the city administration the leeway to conduct an investigation, because they're listening to us and they're hearing what we're saying. So,
Okay, so I'm reading the room, so I make a motion to strike the word implement from the resolution.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to amend the resolution to remove the word and implement from the first resolved. Is there discussion on the proposed amendment? Councillor Taylor?
Have we voted on the update coming by August 12th?
No. That's an excellent point.
So my position on removing the word implement has to do with how quickly we can get the report back so that we can then talk about it.
No, you're right. So I'm going to call the question on August 12th, and then we can discuss the amendment regarding the term implement. So Councillor Leonard, I need to call the question on amending to change the date to August 12th. And then we can discuss the amendment regarding the term implementation. So I will do the roll call vote. And again, this is for the amendment regarding changing the date to August 12th. Counselor Segley.
Aye.
Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla.
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The amendment passes. And now we have the motion in front of us to remove the term implement from the first resolved. And there is a motion, and I believe we had a second on that as well. And Counselor Taylor, did you want to comment on that, or were you just making the point that we had? Okay.
Well, I was making the point that I don't want this to just extend into infinity. I would like to keep it on a tight timeline.
Counselor Leonard, did you want to, did you have a comment on the amendment to remove the word implement?
No, I have a comment after that.
Okay. So then I'll call the question on the proposed amendment to remove the term implement from the first resolved. Counselor Segley.
Aye.
Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla.
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The amendment passes. Counselor Leonard, did you have a comment?
I do. First of all, I too am concerned with speeding on certain streets in town. I brought it up on numerous occasions for numerous years for streets like Harrison and Ruggles, which I know are going to be part of a future big discussion. But it seems to me that the major area of possibly rectifying some of this is to actually enforce the speed limits on some of these streets that Councilor McCalla has mentioned and I have mentioned on occasion over the years. We see the blinking standing sign that says slow or you're going 40 miles an hour. So my comment is that if we're going to do a few streets, that I would like to see those streets included in particular. But I think that the number one thing, if we're trying to bring some kind of safety to these streets where there's so much speeding, is to actually enforce the speed limits. I think that that's a good start. And then we could go forward with having the city administration come up with more and explore more short-term solutions that are included in this resolution. But I think that short-term, it always helps to do something that's the most feasible, because practically, I think that in a short time until August 12th, I don't really know that practically and with city staff stretched out over the summer months that this is going to be able to happen anyway. So I'd like to put that into the minutes.
I would also like to add, you know, I'm glad that we're discussing this. I think there are a lot of valid concerns around the area cited in this resolution. And I mean, I'm happy to see short-term solutions implemented or explored in a short term. You know, obviously we know that the master transportation plan is coming, and that will consider the full city, including this area, but also consider how changes in one area would affect another. But I mean, I think that we also need to recognize, like we're saying, that there are areas of the city that need attention now, especially areas that involve and affect our children, especially as, you know, discussed in this. We are going to be looking at changes to how our kids are getting to school, because it's so, they're going to be walking, biking, taking the walking bus, all of these things. So I do really want to see us be able to at least implement some change to make it safer, that is there and ready to go when the school year starts. What that change is, we'll see. But I think that we need to see something in place when the school year starts.
Madam Chair?
Councilor McCalla?
Yeah, I'd also like to add, like, I live right on Hillside, and if you've ever, it's pretty common knowledge that the Navy, pretty much a lot of people in town use that street as a cut through, and it's really almost, it's not necessarily for, again, enforcement with police, but rather it's more enticing to actually speed through there because there's no stop signs, no signals, no anything. So it almost kind of like, if I guess I'm just trying to describe it as much as possible, but there are those streets that are almost like enticing people to almost like wanna speed in that sense. And I think that coming up with those immediate solutions for safety, I think that to me, that's the best course of action.
Is there any further discussion on the council? Hearing none, I will call the roll call vote. Councillor Segley?
Aye.
Councillor Leonard?
Aye.
Councillor McCalla?
Aye.
Councillor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Councillor Napolitano?
Aye.
Councillor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
A resolution regarding community choice aggregation.
This resolution was introduced by Councillor Taylor, and so I will give her the floor to introduce it.
Thank you. I'm going to summarize this rather than read the resolution. It's long and it's detailed. The intent behind this resolution is for the council to have the opportunity to express its desire to authorize and encourage the city manager and his staff to work together with the Energy and Environment Commission to develop a proposal that the city could consider, which would allow for bulk purchasing of our electricity, with the result that we can direct where we spend our energy dollars and promote a departure from fossil fuel dependence, and that we might also be realizing savings there. And I just want to say that this has really come to our attention because the Energy and Environment Commission, especially under the leadership of Lola Herrera, which I would like to commend, has decided to make this a priority for this year, 2020, and they have looked more closely at this. They are ready to move forward and sort out the details so that they could work with experts in this area to bring forward a proposal to the council. And that's the intention of the resolution. My understanding is that there are a couple of councilors who might prefer some changes in, tweaking the language in the results. I'm open to discussing that. I, at this time, move for passage of the resolution as it is written and presented to us.
Second. There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council? Councillor Leonard?
I looked at this and I understand the intent, but I really had a lot of questions about it. First of all, the city attempted in the past to work with Middletown to get into a solar array agreement. And that didn't work out for a very large number of reasons. I looked at this and I looked at it section by section, and I actually sent emails to some council members, because one of the first resolved is that the city council requests the city administration to work with the Energy Environment Commission to develop a plan to aggregate the retail electric loads within the city through a CCA program in accordance with the act. So first of all this energy stuff, we have seen it over and over. It requires a lot of negotiation, a lot of discussion, a lot having to do with charge of kilowatts and so forth. And I don't think, I mean, I'm not comfortable having any commission work with administration to tie us into a program that we in fact didn't have a whole lot of discussions with in terms of contract language and everything else. Second resolve has to do with all eligible customers would be enrolled in the program unless such customers opt out, so forth and so on. Who are the eligible customers? Who is going to make sure that we're enrolled in that? I don't think we have a choice of where we want to buy our energy. The third resolve is to promote net metering and energy independence, which I think in one section is good, but in another thing that takes a whole lot of research, I think the public has a right to weigh in, because there are really not a lot of money savings you can look, because whenever National Grid loses from renewable payments, they just add it on to the distribution charges of the bill. There are a lot, if it weren't for all of the subsidies, I think, that the solar companies or wind companies receive from the taxpayers, I doubt that many of them would survive. And we could see that because going way back to Solyndra, where $500 million went down the tubes. So I understand the intent of this, but I really think that we really need to have a big discussion of this in terms of impact on the community, on all the ratepayers, on who would be responsible. I'm not comfortable at all saying that the city council wants the administration to work with the Energy Environment Commission and to go forward to create an aggregation plan and a program. I want to see it done with a big umbrella over it so that everybody understands what we would get into. We found that out with the solar array discussions with Middletown. This is a really complex issue. It's not something that we just say, doesn't that sound nice? And we're going to get clean energy. But in the long term, there are contracts, how do you implement it? Who benefits? Who has to pay the difference? I just really can't support it like this. I think that the Energy and Environmental Commission has worked hard, but I don't really think that they're engineers or experts in it. I think that's something that we would have to look at as consultants and come up with a big plan, as we were trying to do with the solar array in Middletown.
Councillor Taylor.
Madam Chair, I just would like to respond to you, Councillor Leonard. The language in the resolve paragraphs, and believe me, I have read over this and edited it word by word. To me, it says that the city council requests the city administration or the city manager or his designee to work with the EEC to develop a plan, etc. And then the next resolved is saying that the city council requests the same bodies to develop with substantial public outreach and education. To me, this is crystal clear that there needs to be, and that we're calling for substantial public outreach and education. It can't go forward without it, because the customers themselves, Newport residents, must be aware that they have the option to opt out of the program. So this takes a massive amount of education, and we can't get to that level of education until we have a plan with some details that we can be discussing. So that's what I believe the language says. I'm open to suggestions for how it can say that better.
I would like to say, I agree with Councillor Taylor. There's multiple places where in this resolution it says develop a plan with substantial public outreach and education, have the city administration work with the Energy and Environment Commission to seek outside consulting services, have the city administration and Energy and Environment Commission provide regular updates to the council, and regarding the development and administration of the aggregation plan, and that would feature a plan for public input and a public hearing for final approval, before final approval. I mean, I think that I'm really happy to see us continuing to explore how we can reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Just because something, the effort we were working on with Middletown didn't work out, doesn't mean that we can't figure out another way to do something like this. And I think that just because something is complicated doesn't mean that we shouldn't work on it. And there's numerous places in this where, to me, it makes it clear that public outreach and education and involvement would be a priority in the development of such a plan. So I'm in support of this. I think that it gives us a good path forward on how we would actually get into a CCA program.
Madam Chair.
Councilor McKella.
I'd also like to say that I support this resolution as well, because just to piggyback again, this is a resolution that is just asking for a continued conversation to happen. And I also recognize too that our planning department, as well as our planning board and our Environment and Energies Commission, we're all in support of this. And I feel like we've got some pretty talented people, and I do think that it's a good thing to have this conversation going. And I do agree, Kate. There's so many questions that we need to make sure that we're teasing out. But I also recognize too that our planning board and planning department also helps to assist us in those complicated endeavors or projects.
Is there further discussion? Councilor McLaughlin.
Thank you. I support the concept of developing a CCA program. I've read the entire act, which runs 2.5 pages of single space words. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to act in accordance with both the letter and the spirit of the enabling of the legislation under which we would be acting. I would key on something that our chair just mentioned, and that had to deal with, energy sourcing. That needs to be more socialized in the community. What are we talking about here? We're talking about aggregation to save money. But we're introducing the concept of, well, we're going to pick which energy sources we're going to use. That's a totally separate concept. And I'm not sure that that's been properly socialized within the community. And it needs to be. So the community understands that there will be benefits to saying, we're going to use clean energy sources as opposed to other sources. But that actually may be more expensive. And so that's part of the discussion that has to occur as well. So as I read the 5 resolves, I have no problem with number 1, number 4, and number 5. But number 2 actually reaches a conclusion which the act itself says we should have a discussion to decide which way we're going to go. And that's whether we should opt everybody in or let everybody opt themselves in if they want to. So that's a discussion that we haven't had yet. And yet this resolve may be making a decision. And if we pass it, we're passing an act of legislation, and it could come back later to somebody will say, well, that's what you said. And I don't necessarily want to say that tonight. In the 3rd resolve, it talks about how we might actually spend the savings. But it lists a certain number of things. But again, that hasn't been socialized in the community, and that needs to be discussed in the community. So the act of creating a CCA plan and a program, which then can be, robustly socialized in the community, is a good thing to do. But I think resolves 2 and 3 go a little bit too far for this first step. And I make a motion to strike resolves 2 and 3 from the resolution, and once they're gone, I will fully support what remains.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to amend the resolution. Is there discussion on the proposed amendment? Counselor Leonard?
I totally agree with Counselor McLaughlin. I think this is really kind of overreaching. But I also want to say that when looking at this, I mean, I know we all would like to have clean energy, and I know we'd all like to have savings, but I can speak for myself, and I don't know anybody else in that room who I would consider an expert on any of this, including our Energy Environment Commission that works really hard. I think that everybody gathers knowledge and works really hard to gather that knowledge. But at the same time, we're talking about programs that are far reaching and years to come. And I just don't comfortably feel that we have experts in the community that haven't dealt with this and with other communities. I think that's where consultants come in and attorneys come in. I'm just not comfortable saying that we're gonna tie ourselves into something without doing a lot of homework. I mean, everybody knows me. I do tons of homework to come to a conclusion. And I don't feel like I'm an expert enough to know that all these resolves can happen. I agree with Counselor McLaughlin. I just have a hard time. I understand the intent. I understand all that. I'm just not comfortable with this as it sits.
Madam Chair,
Counselor McCall?
I'd like to ask the city solicitor a question. In regards to this resolution, does this mean that we are entering into some type of binding contract? Is this going to hold us to lawyers, litigation?
No, it's not a contract, it's your declaration of policy. The staff and the boards that are going to review this will be looking at your declaration of policy and determining, I mean, there's some parts that could be considered discretionary and some that could be considered more directory. So I think that's maybe some of the points being made, but is it a contract? No.
Is there further discussion on the council on the proposed amendment? I mean, Councilor Leonard, I think that do you have something different on the proposed amendment than you already spoke on?
I just want to make a comment that I can remember where the state of Rhode Island through the PUC passed legislation that people who installed energy saving equipment on their houses, in particular solar or wind energy, would receive, I can't remember what the original number was, something like 12 cents per kilowatt to go back into the system. And then the state turned around with the PUC and said, oops, no, we're only going to give you 6 cents per kilowatt. So all of this requires a whole lot of thought and a whole lot of discussion and a whole lot of really looking at total picture. So I understand why this is a good start for a discussion, but this is much more than I think that we should be deeming to do.
Madam Chair.
Counselor Segley?
Yes, I'm actually fine with the first resolve. The second one, I was thinking that perhaps, I mean, I like the part about substantial public outreach and education, although I think right now any of that is very difficult with this pandemic. But I think where there might be a sticking point is in which eligible customers would be enrolled in the program unless such customers opt out the program consistent with the requirements. I think that's a little bit specific. So if we could just take out that part and I would be more comfortable with it, and I think the rest of it is fine.
Thank you. I mean, so the amendment, the proposed amendment that is in front of us right now is just to completely strike the second and third resolved paragraphs. And I want to make sure that if there's any more conversation on the dais, well, on the council, on that particular amendment, or if we want to look at actually wordsmithing the paragraphs themselves, because if there's no further discussion on the proposed amendment to strike the second and third paragraphs, we can vote on that, and then we can move forward with further discussion on the resolution as it would stand after that. I don't know how the vote will go. So
Madam Chair, can I just say, I don't really want to beat a dead horse with this. I just, I don't think it really matters whether we have the resolves in or not. I'm just trying to find a way to make it palatable for everyone.
Oh, I understand. I just want to make sure that, because of the motion we have in front of us, I want to make sure everyone is aware of where we are in that conversation. Councilor Taylor, did you?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, as I have said, I think that the expertise at the moment does not reside on the council, and we are turning this over to people with more expertise. If we would have stronger support for the concept by removing number 2 and number 3 of the resolved paragraphs, and the intention of the council is still asking the city administration to work with the Energy and Environment Commission to come up with a plan which we can then discuss with robust public input, I'm fine with the amendment.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Councilor McLaughlin?
I thank Councilor Taylor for her comments, because my action in no way is intended to weaken the concept. It is to strengthen at this point in time, because nothing that we're taking out now can't be added back into the plan and to the discussion. It just makes it a little bit cleaner and clearer now, and focuses on the CAA.
CCA.
Or CCA.
I'm going to call the vote on the proposed amendment then. So this is the proposed amendment to strike paragraphs 2 and 3.
Resolves 2 and 3.
Yes, paragraphs 2 and 3 of the resolves, because there's 5 resolves. Councilor Segley.
Aye.
Councilor Leonard.
Aye.
Councilor McCalla.
Aye.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano.
Aye.
Councilor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. So the resolved no longer includes the second and third ones. I have noticed that we have actually a member of the Energy and Environment Commission who is on the line who would like to comment. So, Madam Clerk, can we allow Sean O'Connor to comment?
Yes, I think he should be all set.
Okay, Mr. O'Connor, would you, can you introduce yourself with your name and address for the record?
Yes, hello, Council. It's nice to see everyone, mostly in the chamber. And this is Sean O'Connor. I'm at 2 Tyler Street in Newport. And yeah, one of the commission members who's been working on this. I just wanted to comment, that yes, this is really the first step, because as much as I've learned about it, I also am not an ultimate expert on this. And this is really just a first step to authorize the creation of the plan and give us the space as part of that plan to really focus on that public outreach and making sure that the council and the community feels really good about it. And just regarding the amendment that you are all considering, I did want to flag 2 things for you. One, that to my knowledge, no problem at all to strike that resolve 3. Just to speak to the spirit of that resolve, that was to, there's no binding language in it, to my understanding, in that piece of the resolve. It was to sort of highlight or encourage as part of the plan process to explore how savings could be, rather than passed to the customer, potentially reinvested into the city. In some ways, it doesn't actually matter because that we can figure that out. Well, the team that works on this and the city administration, with help from consultants, will figure that out as part of the planning process. So just want to say, really not a big deal to remove that resolve at this stage. The second resolve that has the part about the unless such customers opt out, it's my, and this is where it gets a little fuzzy for me, but it felt important to bring up. It's my understanding that if that clause gets removed, it might be problematic for the enactment of a plan. And I can't really speak to that more, but I can say that one of the experts, who is a likely consultant that we would work with, who a lot of the other Rhode Island communities are working with, Jamie Rhodes from Good Energy, is on the call or is on a meeting here tonight. So I would just suggest that Mr. Rhodes might be able to speak to why the removal of that specific language could be problematic. Fortunately, I can't say more on that. Otherwise, thank you for considering. This is really, really exciting. And you can all let me know if it's possible to hear from Mr. Rhodes about that specific issue with results.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connor. Councilor Leonard? Taylor?
Thank you, Sean. I just want to say we have voted to remove those two paragraphs, so that discussion is over. Myself, I could easily imagine where your bargaining power, if you're talking about an aggregate purchase of power, is significantly diminished if you don't have people, with the default opt-in. But I think that those details are something that can be presented to us when the plan is fleshed out and ready for presentation with those details to the council and to the public.
Madam Chair?
Councilor McLaughlin?
And I understand we have voted, but I would, for clarification purposes, read to you from the statute. An ordinance or resolution under this section shall specify whether the aggregation will occur only with the prior consent of each person owning, occupying, controlling, or using an electrical load center proposed to be aggregated, or will occur automatically for all persons pursuant to the opt-out requirements of this section. So the act itself creates a paradigm in which people will either opt in or opt out, and that's the discussion which we need to have in the community so that the community knows what we're asking them to buy into. So I don't think, I didn't make my motion without an understanding that that's what we were talking about, and I don't see a problem. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the council on the resolution as amended? All right. I think that we can then call the question. And again, I'd like to say thank you to the Energy and Environment Commission and to Councilors Taylor and McCalla for bringing this forward. I think that this is a really good step for us as a city. Councilor Segley? Aye. Councilor Leonard?
Aye.
Councilor McCalla? Aye. Councilor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano?
Aye.
Councilor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
A resolution in support for Newport School Committee Resolution 2020-06-23.
This is a resolution that was introduced by Councilor McLaughlin, so I will give him the floor for introduction.
On our consent calendar tonight, we received a resolution that was passed by the school committee at its meeting on 23 June, in which they urged the General Assembly to basically give to the communities the money that Governor Raimondo has proposed to give to the communities for education. And I just thought it would be a fitting thing for us to support their initiative. There is no fiscal impact by our doing this. It merely shows that we also believe that the governor's targeted revenue for education in Newport and in the communities throughout the rest of the state should stay at the level that they're at. And that's why I thought this would show support to the school committee. But it's a win-win for everybody. And I won't entertain any motions to eliminate any of the resolves or the where. Anyway. Thank you.
Did you make the motion?
Make a motion.
I make a motion. Well, I'll read the resolve because not everybody in the audience has it. The City Council of Newport expresses its support for the Newport School Committee Resolution 2020-06-23 and directs that a copy of this resolution be conveyed to members of the Rhode Island General Assembly. And I would ask your clarification. I assume that when we do that, the city clerk sends an email to all of those people. She doesn't have to generate letters to all of the members of the General Assembly. Otherwise, I'd change it. But thank you. So I make a
Second.
motion.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council? Thank you, Councilor McLaughlin, for introducing this. If there is no further discussion, I will call the roll call vote. Councilor Segley? Aye. Councilor Leonard?
Aye.
Councilor McCalla?
Aye.
Councilor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano?
Aye.
Councilor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
Second reading of an ordinance amending chapter 10.28.080 entitled Easton Beach Parking Lot.
This is the second reading of an amendment to the Easton Beach parking lot ordinance regarding the parking times and fees in that lot. I move passage.
Second.
There is a motion and a second.
Madam Chair.
Councilor, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, thank you. I thought I was going to get away this evening without having to say a word, but obviously that's not the case. But the last meeting, there was a question with regard to the portion of the ordinance D2. And that reads that the parking of vehicles in excess of 20 feet in length and the parking and or storage of construction equipment are prohibited. I had a short conversation with the Recreation Administrator, Eric Reese, who was here, and his request is that we strike that language out of the ordinance, the proposed ordinance. There was also a question on the exclusion of buses and whether this language, of course, which it probably would have excluded buses, but we want the buses under normal times. Of course, we want the buses because we want the revenue that is generated from the buses. But his request, my request, the administration's request is to strike that language with regard to what I just referred to, D2.
Thank you. Was there a reason why it was included to begin with?
I'm not sure. It's just the draft. I could ask the drafters of it, which would be the solicitor's office and Mr. Reese, as to why that language is included in the first place. Do we know? You have to, if you could come up to the podium, please.
Where's that mess?
That language was initially in there because it was basically a copy paste of the Mary Street parking ordinance. So it's kind of an oversight. So asking for that to be removed would make it work for the beach.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm asking Eric, by the way, to stick around because I think as part of the briefing at the end, the council may have some questions with regard to the beach, and so he can comment later as well.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Napolitano.
I just want to mention the buses that are usually there are with kids from Providence who really don't have the opportunity to get down to the beach. So, you know, I haven't seen any other buses really, except for those that are bringing these kids down. I feel very strongly that we should allow them. And most of the time during the week when they come, it's weekdays. So the lots aren't full. So.
I move that we strike out section D2.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council on the proposed amendment? Hearing none, I will hold the roll call vote. Councilor Segley?
Aye.
Councilor Leonard?
Aye.
Councilor McCalla?
Aye.
Councilor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano?
Aye.
Councilor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes. Is there discussion on the council on the proposed overall ordinance amendment as amended? Hearing none, I will hold the roll call vote. Counselor Segley.
Aye.
Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla.
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
Second reading of an ordinance amending chapter 10.24.010 entitled Parking Prohibited at All Times in Designated Places.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve on second reading the amendment to the prohibition of parking to include north side of Wellington Avenue.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council? Counselor Leonard?
Can I have an explanation from administration? I know that this was on there before COVID for a meeting that I believe passed on first reading, but that was now months ago. Is this I know that there were signs on Wellington that were there and then seemed to have disappeared. Is that related to this, or maybe somebody from administration can explain it to me?
No, Director Riccio is here and hasn't been here since March 11th, but maybe you could come up to the podium, Bill, and address that question, please.
Basically, there's existing yellow curb in front of Ida Lewis, and Ida Lewis asked us to formalize it in the code. So that's all this is about.
Okay, so that's the section where the seawall was collapsing and so forth?
Yeah, they're right in front of the yacht club itself.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Riccio.
Thank you, Bill.
Is there further discussion on the council? Hearing none, I will hold the roll call vote. Counselor Segley?
Aye.
Counselor Leonard?
Aye.
Counselor McCalla?
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano?
Aye.
Counselor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
First reading of an ordinance amending chapter 5.57 entitled Mobile Food Establishments to amend section 5.57040 entitled Restrictions on Permits.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve on first reading the added restriction relating to mobile food establishments to prohibit their operation on Bellevue Avenue.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council?
Madam Chair,
Counselor McLaughlin?
I want to share with the council my perspective on this and see how the council feels about it. I do not believe personally that we probably ever thought that there would be large food trucks on Bellevue Avenue when we passed the mobile food truck ordinance. I may be wrong about that, but I clearly in my own mind, I never really imagined that that's what would happen. But sometimes things happen because you don't necessarily consider all of the possibilities. So my general sense is that Bellevue Avenue is a special street in the city of Newport. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to help maintain it as the attractive street that it is, and food trucks don't necessarily belong there. However, the analogy in my mind is that this is like a baseball game and we're in the fourth inning, and we announced to everybody what the rules of the game were at the beginning of the game. And I don't think it's necessarily fair to change the rules in the middle of a license. There is no life or death issue here. It is a bit of a quality of life issue for some people in the community who don't feel that the truck should be there. But it is my belief that as a matter of fairness, we gave this license to these licensees. We told them when we gave it to them that these were the conditions. And I think we have a responsibility to respect that we created those conditions and let them continue to operate at that location through the end of their current license. I'm not sure exactly how to make a motion to change what's before us tonight. I'd be curious to see if anybody else in the council would support that suggestion. I hope they will. So that's that. I think that we have a responsibility as a matter of fairness to act in that capacity. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Counselor Taylor?
And then, thanks. I actually agree absolutely with Counselor McLaughlin. I am not sure that Bellevue was a wise choice. I appreciate how much we do invest in the functionality of Bellevue each year and keeping the paving good. So I'm inclined to, I agree with everything he said. However, I'm going to use something other than a baseball analogy. I'm going to use, coming from a legal background, the Supreme Court honoring its own precedent. We made the decision about the food trucks and where they would be licensed to operate for this year. And we should not be changing the rules, going back upon a decision that we had made after just an arduous effort to reach conclusions. And I hope that we would revisit this after this season is over. But I think that means that unless we find a way to amend this particular amendment to the ordinance, I will be voting against.
Madam Chair.
Counselor Seckley?
When is the end of the current license? When does that expire?
Can I ask that the Assistant City Solicitor come in? Can you speak into the microphone?
Joe doesn't want anybody speaking into this mic. I believe the applications are due for the next year's license on March 1st. Is that right, Laura?
The license expires March 31st,
March 31st.
2021.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, what I was going to say is Councilor McLaughlin stole my thunder, because that was exactly what I was going to propose, was to have this go until the end of the season and then take a real hard look at it for next year. I think that's only fair.
Counselor Leonard?
I understand, because when this first came to the council, it became a convoluted discussion of the whole city, and I voted no because of it. And I'm looking at this as it sits in front of us today. And I had said before, and I'll say it again, I really don't think that big food trucks the size of tractor trailers belong in a residential zone. And I can say that since we implemented this, since the council did, I can tell you in King Park area that the big mobile food truck probably takes up 3 spaces, and the diesel is running until, I guess I'm told, late at night. And I'm looking at the hours of what this ordinance was passed that allowed them from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And people who live on the street, which is a residential street, for example, on Wellington, are not happy that the hours of operation with the diesel humming away in front of their houses is happening for hours and hours on end. I think this, I said it before and I say it again, I think we really need to go back and say, what areas do we want these to operate? And I know that the people that received the licenses and applied for them put a substantial amount of money into an investment into doing this. But I think before we renew these licenses, we really need to have a further discussion on what areas of town we really would like to see them operate. And we said the hours from, I think it was 11 to 7, but I personally don't think it's fair that if you live in a residential street, that you should happen to hear the diesels running in front of your house till 10 o'clock at night. So maybe part of it might be to remind the license holders that there are hours of jurisdiction, and that we take a further look at it before it comes to the council with the licenses that expire on March 31st of 2021.
Madam Chair,
Counselor Johnson.
since I brought it up, I was receiving the phone calls, and I really didn't realize it was Bellevue. And I understand the other restaurants located in the area. But I think perhaps offering a compromise at this time, but I must say, when we discuss it again, Bellevue, in my mind, is out of the question for a lot of different reasons. And I wasn't even thinking the amount of money we have been putting into Bellevue out of our budget. So I would be willing to do the compromise, but I want to address this again, maybe in January if we, or whenever, prior to issuing licenses and where the streets would be. My father used to say, this is what happens when you do that. And it just, I wasn't sure what he meant until I did this. So I would be willing to compromise.
I'd like to say, when we passed the food trucks ordinance, the language in it is to allow food trucks in all zones where restaurants are included by right. And so, I think that if we, as we go forward having the discussion, I think we ought to make sure that we're looking at it from a zoning perspective and having the conversation of, do we want to incorporate food trucks into the zoning language in our ordinances as well, in the same way that we incorporate restaurants, because they're in the general business district or the waterfront business district. Restaurants are allowed by right. And so we sort of almost did the same thing with this ordinance, but in a way that makes it a little bit more complicated, in a way that I think that we could probably make it simpler. So I think if we don't think that certain areas should have food trucks and others should, I would like to see us consider it from a zoning perspective. Because we do talk about how the decisions we make need to consider the entire city, and we need to make those decisions from that perspective. But I do also want to allow us the time to hear from members of the public, and I know that we already have 2 folks who have raised their hands. And so I am going to first
Madam Chair,
ask.
I did want to say something.
Oh, okay. Well, then Turner Scott, you have to hold for 1 moment while Councilor McCalla is given the floor.
Sorry. I feel like you guys know where I stand on this. I've said it before. I think that we are opening ourselves up to a can of worms. And if we are making exceptions for one, we are going to have to make exceptions for others. The reality of the situation is that the reason why that this ordinance change had come through was because this was competition between brick and mortar and a couple of neighborhoods that didn't think that it was characteristic, like that it fit the character of their neighborhoods. And the reality of the situation is we started this journey thinking that we were going to create an incubation piece in a period. And for this, for Amano Pizza in particular, to stand there for 3 hours out of the whole day to make that parking and then have to move their trucks. They followed everything. This was not an issue of trash. This was not an issue of noise. This was simply they were following the rules. And I feel like if we're going to do this in Bellevue, where else? Who's to say that Broadway's not going to go up there and say that you're threatening my neighborhood too? Or that these trucks need to get out of here because because they're affecting the brick and mortar businesses in the restaurants. We have no evidence to suggest that this needs to happen right here, right now. For me, I feel like I'm opposed to this. I feel like given, we had made segments to try to generalize things and play what was fair in terms of zoning, our zoning business districts. I don't think that this is fair. I'm not going to support this.
Madam Chair.
I have my hand up.
what do you think we're doing? I'm not sure. Do you realize that we're saying they can remain there for the balance of this time? However, we need to address this again. This is the prerogative of the council. This
To
is
look
changing
changing
a
law
second-
right here, right now, and saying that Bellevue Avenue still needs to be stricken from the MFETs. And the reality of the situation is we have no evidence to suggest that this needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if a member of the council would like to put forward a motion to change what we're discussing,
If I may,
we
Madam
can do
Chair,
that.
I make a motion that we direct the city clerk to bring before the city council at its first meeting in January, section 557040 for consideration of the council at that time for, reconsideration of any of the conditions in it. And until such time, it just stays the way it is.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the
Madam Chair.
item, but I do want us to hear from members of the public. I think it's very important that we hear from, because I know that there are people who are associated with the food trucks, people who are associated with the brick and mortar, and people who are associated with the neighborhoods who do all have things that they want to say on this.
Madam Chair, I had my hand up for a while. I don't know if you saw it.
Councilor Leonard, do you want to have a comment on the discussion regarding postponing this item? Or
Well, I had a comment, but before Councilor McCalla spoke, but you didn't call on me. So I'd like to say something now because I think it's important. I think it's important that we all realize, and Councilor McCalla talked about bricks and mortar, but the people who have bricks and mortar businesses pay property taxes, or they pay taxes with the triple net
No
lease.
evidence to suggest that there is competition between a mobile food truck and a restaurant.
I don't know where you get that. All I can tell you is some pay taxes and some don't. And if people feel threatened by it, then we need to listen to them and then we can discuss the big picture. But that's how I feel.
Listening to people is what I'm trying to have us do. And so I am going to open it up to the public. And Mr. Turner Scott, can you please identify yourself with your name and address for the record? And you may begin speaking.
Madam Chair, Turner Scott, my office is at 122 Toro Street. I represent two of the license holders of the mobile food trucks. I've said pretty much all I wanted to say at the last meeting, so I'm not going to get into that. But I would like to make just a few quick points, and one of those would be that I think we all know when you all passed the ordinance, there was a certain urgency to pass the ordinance because of the state having passed the law allowing food trucks. So you needed to have something. I don't think there's anybody that sat in that audience, and I sat in every single minute of that torturous discussion you guys had with regard to food trucks. I don't think there's anybody there that didn't think that there'd have to be some amendments to this ordinance as it went forward. And my clients recognize that. We would like to be able to be a part of any changes to the ordinance because we think that there is a spot in Newport for these ordinances as a way to be able to utilize those food trucks. I'm going to say as an aside that my clients have always abided by the rules. They know they know the hours. They know they only use 2 parking spaces. They don't use 3 parking spaces. They don't do it until the middle of the night. And I haven't seen any other food trucks in Newport other than my clients' 2 food trucks on Wellington and one of them up on Bellevue Avenue every once in a while. So I believe that, and I support the tabling of this motion until January. I'd like to have it until the end of January or the first part of February. And I'd like to be able to, and I will do it through Mr. Galvin, suggest changes ourselves to the ordinance that may make it more palatable. I don't think you should take Bellevue Avenue off the table. I think that should be discussed. I mean, you're in front of a parking lot and you're looking at the back end of the Tennis Hall of Fame stands, grandstands. So, it's not sacrosanct. That area of Bellevue is not sacrosanct. And I don't think you should take it off the table. but you should have a discussion about it. There's no question about that. We would, obviously, we'd prefer that you not change it at all, and we don't think you should get into the council deciding every single time somebody has a complaint, all of a sudden, okay, now we have to react to it. You set the policy, you did that. I agree with Council McLaughlin that it should last out through the end. My clients support that, and we would like to be able to revisit it at that time. We'd also like to be able to put some information to you and maybe some changes that we feel are appropriate for both the residents and the businesses. We recognize that conflict, and we'd like to be able to put some information into you and give you some suggestions when you do revisit it. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you very much for having me in this forum.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. The next person is, the last four digits of your phone number are 8372. Can you please identify yourself with your name and address for the record?
Hello all. This is Margaret Mulholland at 13 Seaview Avenue, Newport, Rhode Island. I've been a resident here since 1983. I value Bellevue Avenue very much. It has historical significance. We have mansions, we have museums, we have beautiful institutions, and a truck with selling food is not appropriate for that street. Bellevue Avenue is known around the world as a prestigious avenue. It's called the Avenue. All of the shops on Bellevue, that's where their parking is, their designated parking. The parking lot is special for the people in the Bellevue Plaza. You're not to park in there if you're going to, let's say, the Tennis Hall of Fame, or you're going over to Varika's Gallery. The galleries and the fancy shops need their parking. We don't need Coney Island on Bellevue Avenue. We don't need pizza trucks. We don't need taco trucks. We don't need lobster rolls. We don't need popcorn. We don't need lemonade. We don't need ice cream. We have established wonderful businesses that we need to support. Now, there is room for trucks. There's a lot of room for trucks on this island. Everybody can get a piece of the pie, but not on Bellevue Avenue, not on that prestigious block, which is historical, and it's the Avenue. Doris Duke would be rolling over her grave to listen to this conversation tonight, and so would the Vanderbilts. I want you to just consider the history and the significance of this street. It would be like putting a food truck next to the Eiffel Tower. You don't do that. We don't do that in Newport. I've been here since '83. We need to value our boulevard, and we need to keep it pure for the shoppers on the Bellevue Avenue to shop, and for the people to go into the restaurants where appropriate. We don't need food trucks. We need them, like, for example, at the film festivals. That's wonderful. It's a great benefit. Or we need them at any outdoor event. It's wonderful. Or if they had a food desert over on the Ocean Drive, it would be ideal. There's no food there. If you want to have a picnic, you're out of luck, unless you bring your own. So let's think about putting them somewhere where people could go have a picnic, watch the sunset, enjoy the food trucks, and have a night on the town, not on Bellevue Avenue. We need to reserve this historic, significant block for the people of this town and for tourists who want to come in and shop on those Bellevue Avenue shops or eat in the restaurants. We don't need to have Coney Island on Bellevue Avenue. We don't need that. It takes away from our city, and it really cheapens the whole avenue. I'm like beside myself. I'm a designer, I'm a visual artist, and I see that, and it makes my hair stand up straight. We don't need it, and you really need to consider the historical value and what you're doing to our avenue. That's all I have to say, but I thank you for your time anyway.
Thank you, ma'am. Madam Chair. Councilor Stegley.
You know, when we wrote this ordinance from scratch, I did think it was a perfect ordinance, and I knew that we would have to see how things would go based on the reality of the situations. And you know, I think that we need further discussion about this, but at the same time, I feel as though we did create this ordinance, so let's stick with it for, until the end of their current license, and let's, just keep moving forward and making it better. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Councilor McLaughlin.
I'd like to amend the motion that I made, just to say, the motion would now state that we will table this item, and then we will direct the city clerk. We're not making any decisions for the next council. We're just making, in a sense, a statement that we see the need to discuss it, and that it doesn't make any difference to me whether it's January or February. In respect to our friend Turner Scott, if he thinks early February is a good time, that's fine with me. It's just, don't let it fall through the crack. The new council, who's ever on it, will want to have an opportunity to discuss this in light of what we're saying tonight and in light of everything else that's happened. So,
Second, Madam Chair.
There's a motion and a second. Councilor Taylor.
I just would like to address the time frame on this. I think in fairness to the people who want to apply for a license for the next season, since March 31st is the expiration, or?
Yes, but anybody that currently has a license has the right of first refusal. So as long as they apply to renew by the deadline, which I believe is February 15th, then they're first in line to get that license.
So the current license holders would need to be making, would need to have the information to make an informed decision about next season prior to February 15th. Right. Okay, so I am going to support that this be tabled until the first meeting in January at the very latest.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's fine. I think that makes sense.
And how does the amendment read right now?
I was tabling the item and directing the clerk to bring it before the council at our first meeting in January.
Good, thank you.
Perfect. And I would just also like to say, you know, I wasn't in favor of the original discussion to remove Bellevue. I think that when we look at how we're doing food trucks, we need to look at it in a very similar vein of how we look at how we're doing restaurants or any other type of business in the city, and incorporate the availability of food trucks into the zoning ordinances themselves, just like we incorporate what types of businesses are allowed by right in certain districts, because I just think it makes it cleaner, and I also think it makes it for I think it's a better discussion. So I just want to say that I hope that when we do discuss it in January, when the council discusses it in January, that it is looked at from a zoning point of view.
Madam Chair, I call the question.
So I will do the question by roll call. Councilor Segley. Aye. Councilor Leonard.
Aye.
Councilor McCalla.
Aye.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano.
Aye.
Councilor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
First reading of an ordinance amending chapter 14.04.030, the codified ordinances entitled moratorium.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve on first reading the addition to section 1, chapter 14.04.
Second.
Second. There is a motion and a second. This item is adding a section in our ordinances that deal with a moratorium on marijuana retail sales, and it would put a moratorium in place in the city for a period of 6 months from the date of the passage. And so this requires 2 readings, so it would be from the date of the passing at the second reading. Is there discussion on the council? Hearing none, I'll call the roll call vote. Councilor Segley? Aye. Councilor Leonard?
Aye.
Councilor McCalla?
Aye.
Councilor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Councilor Napolitano?
Aye.
Councilor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
Action number 5392.
Madam Chair, I move that the council award the bid for road materials to the 8 low bidders as outlined in the action item.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve. Is there discussion on the council?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just have a question. Can we add mulch to this list of items for the dog park?
Mr. City Manager? Oh, Mr.
I'm
Riccio.
gonna have
Okay.
Mr. Riccio comment because he's the
Can
mulch
we
guy.
add?
I don't think it's typical mulch. I think we use the wood chips from our forestry program for that.
Yeah,
I can look into it, but we'll have to we can do a separate
okay, that would be great because
thing for that, but I'll check. I'm pretty sure we use the chips that we make
from the Christmas trees, yeah. Well, because.
Well, no, just general shipping of
Oh,
forestry
just,
stuff.
okay. Well, it's just, it, every now and then it just gets to be really soggy and the dogs dig and it just makes it kind of unpleasant, but that would be great.
I think typical mulch would make it worse.
Okay.
But
Okay,
we'll figure out.
okay, thank you.
Is there any
Thank you,
further
Bill.
discussion?
Invaluable.
Hearing none, I'll hold the roll call vote. Counselor Stegley?
Aye.
Counselor Leonard?
Aye.
Counselor McCalla?
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano?
Aye.
Counselor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
Action number 5933.
And Madam Chair, I move that we award the bid for utility supplies to the 6 vendors who are recommended in the action item.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council? Hearing none, I will call the vote. Counselor Stegley?
Aye.
Counselor McCalla?
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Counselor Leonard?
Aye. Wait, I'm sorry. I thought you called on me first.
Oh, I thought I hadn't called on you.
She gets to vote twice.
Sorry. Counselor Napolitano?
Aye.
Counselor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn as council and reconvene as Board of License Commissioners.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the council? Hearing none. Counselor Stegley?
Aye.
Counselor Leonard?
Aye.
Counselor McCalla?
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano?
Aye.
Counselor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
A public hearing on the application of 22 Washington Square Inc., DBA Bar Chino, holder of a Class B alcoholic beverage license to expand the licensed premises into 24 Washington Square, including 360 square foot sidewalk cafe consisting of 2 tables with 4 chairs each.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the application by Barcino to
Second.
expand the licensed premises.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that would like to be heard?
Madam Chair, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to close the public hearing. I'll do the roll call vote. Counselor Stegley?
Aye.
Counselor Leonard? Counselor Leonard?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, it's the motion is to close the public hearing.
I had said second anyway, and I got.
How do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Counselor McCalla?
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano?
Aye.
Counselor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion to close the public hearing is approved. Is there any discussion on the council on the motion to approve? Hearing none, I will call the roll call vote. Counselor Stegley?
Aye.
Counselor Leonard?
Aye.
Counselor McCalla?
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano?
Aye.
Counselor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Bova? Aye. The motion passes.
And
So the next item is a hearing on the application for 515 Thames Street, but we are continuing this item. due to a failure to properly notice. So I make a motion that we continue this item to the August 12th meeting.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I will do the roll call vote. Counselor Segley.
Aye.
Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla.
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn as Board of License Commissioners and reconvene as council.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. I will call the roll call vote. Counselor Segley.
Aye.
Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla.
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The motion passes. And I will give the floor to the city manager to give an update on the COVID-19 status.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought we'd start a little bit differently today. Every time that we have this discussion, at least one of you asks about the beach. And we're lucky enough to have the beach has been, I would describe it as a heavy lift in terms of this abnormal time. The Recreation Administrator, Eric Reese, who was responsible for the beach, is here this evening, and I'd like him I asked him some questions earlier today about just how things are going. Could he just provide some critique on the beach? He does note some problems, and I'd like him to come up to the podium and just go over with you the response that he had to some of my questions, because I think the response is a very good one. It'll give you a perspective as to how we're doing down there. And I would say to you, I travel down there often, drive in the parking lot, look for Eric, I hunt you down, and I think things are going pretty well, but there are some issues, and I'd like just go over what you see, Eric, and how you feel about your own management of the beach and some of those things.
Okay. Well, for the most part, I believe the beach is running fairly smoothly with all these restrictions that we have in place. The way that we attack it on a daily basis is that we don't have a firm number out there that's saying we're only allowing 500 cars into the parking lot. So basically the way that we work it every day is in our western parking lot, number one, we allow 200 cars to come in, has a capacity of about 250 vehicles. Then we allow some of the other vehicles to go in the eastern part of the parking lot, another 200, 250. So we get to that 400, 500 mark and we pause and we evaluate and we check out what's going on the beach as far as what the conditions are, if people are social distancing, what the environmental conditions are, what the weather forecast could potentially be before we say we allow more cars in. So any given day, we're attacking the beach operation in a completely different manner. So with that said, I think it's been running pretty smoothly. If you're coming down the hill from Memorial Boulevard, looking down at the beach, it looks busy. But if you're walking the boardwalk and kind of going up and down the beach like we do every day, every 15 minutes seems like we're walking up and down, and people are doing a pretty good job being spaced apart. This past weekend, I mean, that was a different story with 4th of July. I believe that was an anomaly and some issues in itself on really nice beach days or holidays like that. That's kind of where I stand with it. I'm not sure exactly where else you want me to touch upon.
Well, I think that's, Eric, that's a pretty good update unless the council have any questions. It's going pretty well. I think his description of the same things that I saw, I think when you come down the hill, you might see that west parking lot full, but it is a little bit of a dance that's going on, because you can see one of the problems is I'll call them the eastern crowd coming in from Middletown, crowding the eastern end of the beach, and everyone if they pull into the big parking lot, you get the massing. So I guess it's a little bit of a dance that's going on in which you want to use the entire length of the beach to spread people out. I know it was a problem this weekend. Eric and I think we were emailing back and forth about that eastern problem, and we're going to have to talk about that a little bit more as to how to control the crowds. It's an urban beach, if you will. We don't have the luxury, I would say, of controlling the numbers like Middletown in a sense, even though they were very busy since they're out. It's not a place that you can walk to, park in a neighborhood and walk to. But we're going to talk a little bit more about how to control things like that. But on balance, what I've seen can just confirm that there's good social distancing. People are respecting it. Masks are always an issue, but we had that discussion as well. I'm actually going to be down there if the weather holds, which I don't think it's gonna. My plan was to put my own table up down on the beach this weekend with some of the masks that I have, along with the other volunteers that are dispersed throughout the city. But I'm opening up any questions. Eric is here. He's done a lot of things for us this summer. Not only the camps, the baseball stuff that we're implementing down at Cardines with respecting all the COVID rules. But the beach has been I've learned a lot, quite frankly, and the revenue's not bad. People are feeding those paying displays, and the money's getting eaten. So we're doing pretty well from a revenue standpoint.
Eric, if you do see groups either that are too large or too close to each other, a lack of social distancing, how do you guys approach that?
As far as on the beach goes, I mean, people have been pretty good. This past weekend, we don't really approach them. I mean, so the several instances that we did approach people about mask wearing, like in a restroom line, there's been some hostile kind of contact. So we're trying to stay away from that as much as possible, but we're trying to educate over our PA system once an hour, making social distance, mask wearing announcements, trying to continue to educate. Since we've been doing that, we've seen better compliance. Is it great? I mean, I would say less than 50%, but before it was like zero, like on the
Sorry,
boardwalk.
less than 50% doing what?
Wearing masks.
Wearing masks.
So
But what does your message say, the once an hour?
it's basically saying, in accordance to all the executive orders and whatnot, to be wearing a mask and to maintain social distance of 6 feet from one another, in a general sense.
And so would it be helpful, do you think, to have a table, as Joe has been suggesting and we've been talking about, have a table with volunteers passing out masks saying, it's
I think it'd be very helpful.
great.
Being a tourist beach, we see a lot of different people. I mean, we see a lot of residents at the same time, but we see a lot of newcomers. So it's almost like it has to be almost an ongoing thing if we want to see better compliance.
Right, right. And we have been talking among us about the idea of having a police officer on a bicycle who could just be making the rounds and periodically just showing up for moral support, and maybe the odd photograph that gets posted, would go a long way.
We have police details at the beach every single day during this pandemic. At least one on weekdays and almost up to 3 on weekends right now to help assist. As far as on bicycles, and
they're
not really doing that, but they're mostly a traffic concern and trying to help us.
Well, I don't think, Council, I don't think Susan was aware that we had police details assigned down there, semi-permanently. But along the lines of what we have talked about, and that is some strategy using the police vis-a-vis the volunteers, and you have your own experience with the use of the police officers with the volunteers. There does seem to be a little bit more, I hesitate to use the word compliance, but a little more oomph to the whole.
Shift in the attitude. You don't
Yes.
get the hostility.
Yes.
You get, okay, they are serious about this. And I feel nationwide as well, the message is shifting. It just in the last 10 days.
Yeah, because it's getting worse.
Yes, exactly. But, yeah.
What about the cleaning process? Do you find that to be arduous? I mean, how often do you have to do the high touch areas, and what is the protocol for that?
We're cleaning all high touch surface areas once an hour. So I feel like the beach has been the cleanest it's ever been.
Like sterilized beach.
Yes. As far as for vehicles, so all 3 entrances are open. The first parking lot and the third parking lot are open to residents and non-residents. The second parking lot inside the Rotunda complex is resident only. Okay. So the resident can go in any parking lot right now.
Eric, I have a general recreational question I want to ask. Before I do that, How much would a drone cost? Would a drone help you to actually monitor what's going on the beach? You do? Okay, and are we using them? Okay.
Mr. City Manager, I'm gonna tell you to go to the mic. A mic, any mic.
We have a couple of them. We've been talking about that use. I mean, that's exactly what we're going to use. I would like to use them. It's exactly what I would like to use them for, or an example. We have one that is being repaired in the water department, and we also have one in the police department as well.
So, I mean, as a counselor, I'm not going to come up with strategies as to how to achieve outcomes which we want. But I know I want to speak to, I want the outcome of people wearing masks. You know, if somebody doesn't want to wear a mask where we think they should, refund their parking and send them home. You know, the governor today in her comments is getting a little bit more rigid. She's recognizing that we may need to do that. There's no reason to suspect, just because we don't want it to happen, that what's happened in Arizona or Texas or Florida won't happen here. So we, you know, I encourage you to do whatever we can do, but I don't know how to do that. I just want to say I would support whatever initiatives you need to take, and using a drone to keep track of what's going on the beach, or whatever tools you have. If people won't play by the rules that we think are necessary to assure health and safety for our residents and our visitors, then send them home. You know, that would be my sense. Same thing down on Thames Street. So can I ask you one recreation question? Yes. My grandson wants to know when the playgrounds are going to be opened.
I was asked the same question.
That's my question.
Not about my grandson. I just want
I
to go
got
to
it
swing.
right here in my text. My grandson wants to know when he can go to the playground.
Well, he can go to the playground, but it's the use of the equipment, which is high touch equipment, which requires some, you have to follow the CDC guidelines and the state guidelines on. It's a reasonable question, because I suspect when this is opened up, this discussion is open to the public, that question is going to be asked, because it's asked every time. We have to spend a lot of money to do it right, and it's cleaning it. I know there, you know, people have offered to clean these surfaces on their own, but you know, we know how that works sometimes. So it's on the government to come up with a plan, and we don't have a plan yet. And just interestingly enough, it's a discussion. We have this 3 times a week now, I think, or twice a week, this discussion with the governor's office, and this always comes up about the playgrounds. And so every municipality is going through the same thing. And just I'm not going to say the silliness, but it's silly on the one hand, but it's very serious. And that is the need to have products there and be disinfecting it, you know, every hour and washing it every hour. It's just, we don't have the bandwidth to do that.
I have a kind of follow-up question to that, though, which is that the questions that I've been getting, or comments from a lot of residents, is, okay, you're telling us that it's closed, but I can get there. My kids are on it. And so they feel like there's some mixed messaging, and they're concerned about, they're just not sure if they should be on it or not. I tell them they're not supposed to be. They say, well, how come I can get there? Well, how come if I can get there, you don't have the swings up? The swings went up, they went down, they went up, they went down.
Right. The swings should be, when you say down, removed.
Yes.
I had that issue. I'm going to use my Antonoi Park as an example. During one of the demonstrations out there, there was one swing that was being used, and I looked at it and I said, there was signage there. The signage was removed. Same thing with up by the King Center. The signage was removed. We had it wrapped all up in this nice plastic stuff, and some places just the police tape. It gets taken down. Our playgrounds, and maybe it's to our credit and maybe it's to our detriment now, are wide open and easily accessible. Do we have the public works? I had this discussion with Director Riccio the other day about as he drove by, or maybe it was Justin. Not that I'm confusing you two, but the use of the Edward King Center exercise equipment, and it was being used, and we put signs up, and early on we had that plastic wrap all around it, and I saw one guy just rip it down, and I just kind of walked away. I said, "You shouldn't be doing that." And of course, he had a few choice words for me. So it's not something that's easily controllable. I will just say that I don't know the complete science, and none of us do, behind these surfaces that are being in public that could be contaminated, and it's a risk. It's the same reason why baseball is being allowed, but basketballs, the guidelines are no basketball, and it's because of the interaction between the individuals and the balls and all that other good stuff. So it's a difficult issue. I wish I could say I'd like to come up with something to have these playgrounds open. I'd like to come up with something to have these basketball courts open, but the guidelines are kind of discouraging it. And of course, with some of the requirements, it's even more discouraging. We're not going to have someone standing there with some sanitizer and wipes, and every time a kid's on it, wiping down the surface. That's the conundrum of all of this.
As soon as you put the tape up, or as soon as you put a sign up, it's gone.
Yeah, we had some nice signs, and they disappeared pretty quickly.
Because I see it, I see
Not
it
only
happen.
that, the tape that I don't care where you put it, what place.
Yeah.
I've watched the kids take it off.
Yeah.
I've watched
Yeah, I mean, I think
So
both of
I
us.
think it's kind of,
I mean, I don't have any of these answers at all.
No, I know.
It's discouraging, and I'm a basketball fan, and it's great.
Yeah.
Basketball is a great game, and I like to see the kids play.
yeah.
Okay.
Counselor Leonard, did you have a question?
No, I said I noticed the same things. So the only way any of this stuff ever gets solved, if you want to use the word solved, is politeness obviously is not working. So when you say, please wear a mask, it doesn't work. So the decisions have to be made. Maybe it's with Rido or wherever it is, but it's certainly not working well now. And all one has to do is drive by the beach, go by the beach, drive by town, and we'll have to see where the numbers go, but it's not encouraging, I'll tell you that.
Well, I don't really agree. I mean, Susan and I gave out masks on Friday, and I thought the compliance was pretty good.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I would say at least 70-30, and the people who did not have the masks on were carrying them, or they were just coming out of a store and just, or eating or drinking something. So, I mean, and we were on people, like, wear the mask, it's a requirement. There were some rude people, there's no doubt about it, but I have to say that as I've been driving downtown, and even on Bellevue Avenue today, people were wearing masks in much greater numbers than they were even a week or so ago.
That's interesting. I've still noticed that Bellevue seems now like it has less compliance, but last weekend I was out on Friday and Saturday, and myself, and volunteers all 3 days, but the sense was sort of like 80% compliance, generally speaking, but we keep calling out to people. It's like it's not enough to wear it as a bracelet.
Right.
You got to put it over your nose and
Right.
mouth.
It's doing any good.
But you try to be light and upbeat about it. But we've got a rule, an executive order now for those streets, but the beaches are different, right? We can't.
We have to, it has to be, like what Justin said, it has to be, all hands on deck on this assault and the use of masks. I'm sympathetic, and I hear what people are saying, the ones that are complaining about the lack of use of masks, and that, I take those concerns seriously. And I drive down mostly America's Cup and Thames every day. I look for the people wearing masks. I don't necessarily look for the people not wearing masks. I think others are looking for the people not wearing masks and not looking at the ones that are wearing masks. We talked about earlier a few weeks ago, if we could get 75% compliance, that's what we should shoot for. It'd be great, 100%. We're never going to get 100%. But I think one of the things, so we all have the same goal in mind here. and I want to get into the numbers in a second. We all have that same goal in mind. It's just how we get there. Now, I think we can also, I've had discussions and, you know, I get to a point where I'm boiling over on these issues as well. And I've had these discussions with the police chief and how do we strategize working with, you know, these volunteer groups, working in other areas of the city to get better compliance with mask wearing. Because, I mean, that's one paradigm. The numbers in Rhode Island in a vacuum are doing pretty well. Newport's numbers are, interestingly enough, we had some upticks in the numbers. I've made 3 different inquiries, 2 of the governor's office, and finally today I was able to get an answer from Lido. The answer from the governor's office was, well, the only anomaly they see is an uptick in the those in the 20 to 29 age group getting the COVID. And, you know, that's quite frankly, that's probably nationally when you listen to the news every evening. But the Lido, and there's a lot of different aspects of it. They haven't given us the granular data that I've asked, and why are we seeing this increase? But they don't seem to be alarmed about it. And they said if they get alarmed, we'll be the first people that hear about a problem. Now, the numbers, the interesting thing about the number that was reported Friday, which is normally the Monday number that's reported, I think the Friday is 101, 91 to 101. If you scroll down into the data set, the RIDO data set, there's an inconsistency in one of the tables with that number. And I've asked RIDO to explain the inconsistencies. We're still trending at somewhere between 4%, maybe a little bit more than 4% with that additional 10, but they're still holding us in the data set at 4%, 91 cases versus the 101. So I've asked them, is the 101 just a data dump, or is it in fact that happened in a 4 or 5 day period in which the numbers ticked up 10 additional cases? We need that type of information. And I've also asked with the contact tracing, can't you see, is there any ability, and maybe some of you were on the phone call today, but is there any ability to see a trend? If you have an uptick, and our upticks are pale in comparison to the rest of the state and the numbers that they've seen, but if you see a trend, can't you just point to is there an ability to point to some commonality? Oh, it was a house party that occurred somewhere, or it was some other industry involved, or indeed, even though Dr. Scott has already dispelled that issue in her comments a couple of weeks ago, the protests. Now, on the other hand, the important thing here is, which I think I need to get on the record, is it's not what today is like, because this weekend we were slammed. We know we were slammed with people. Trash, we handled that pretty well. A lot of issues. 300 calls to the police department on Saturday, calls for service. So it's really, and if you listen closely to all the experts, where are we going to be 3 weeks from now, for example, which will probably be maybe reflective of the July 4th weekend. That's really 3 weeks out is really, I think, where we're going to see ourselves as opposed to now. I mean, we can brag in Rhode Island where the numbers are today, small number of positives versus the number of tests that were given. But it's really 3 weeks from now, where do we see ourselves? Or 4 weeks from now. Hospitalizations are down in Rhode Island. But again, where do we see ourselves 3 weeks or a month from now? That's the most important. I think, my own opinion, in watching these numbers every day, and listening to all this stuff and reading about all this stuff, that's the important metric. 3 weeks to 4 weeks from now, as a reflection of this slammed weekend.
Joe, has there been discussion on the municipal leaders conference call about the governor's app that she's been touting, the Crush COVID? I know she sent out an email urging people to download it and use it because as I understand it, the idea is that that could help to identify whether there are trends or hotspots and
Hasn't been a lot of discussion about it other than urging the download. I've downloaded it. But there hasn't been any, real discussion about the identity. We know where the crush was. Here we go. The crush was in terms of the populations that were most affected by this. And, you know, of course, I think nationally you're seeing a little bit of a shift. My God, you look at Florida and, you know, the pictures of their beaches and the like, and you say, holy cow, no one gets it. And some of these other states, and hopefully we get it. That's all I can say until but we're in this soup. We're going to stay in this soup until, and it's not going to get a heck of a lot better unless we practice the generics of social distancing, wearing masks, washing your hands, and we just see where we are in the fall. You know, I probably watch too much of CNN and these other, as well you do, I'm sure. And it's tough to watch.
Joe, can you, how are we doing with testing availability in the city?
Yeah, oh, I'm glad you brought that up. And this is not to criticize at all. The testing ability that is occurring out in the North End EBCAP, they're doing a great job. I think in a 2-month period, I don't know if I contacted them. I think I spoke with Angela as well. They tested maybe 289 people. I didn't think that necessarily was enough. On the other hand, there is an initiative. This initiative existed last week, and we were involved in this initiative, and that is, and I think it would be telling, getting the restaurant workers tested at a pop-up test site. And we were talking about using the Gateway Center and the like. I think that would
regular basis.
Right, they could just walk right over there and get tested. I was a little disappointed when I reached out to the same contact that contacted me last week about maybe making those arrangements at the Gateway Center.
From the governor?
From the governor's office, and their answer was, oh, I'll get back to you on that.
Mm-hmm.
So and I'm going to press on that. I'm going to press again tomorrow on it because I think it's that sector of the industry, those workers that are exposed to the crowds and to the people that we've had here in Newport, that would be, I think, very telling. Though I will say that, in my opinion, hasn't changed since last week, that the restaurants have done a marvelous job with instructing their patrons, insisting on their patrons on wearing masks, but there are still some places that are a problem. I reached out today I got some anecdotal information. I reached out to one place today. I then contacted Rido and said, you got to help me out with this place. They reached out. I've got some data a spreadsheet from them that they sent me this morning that I promised to share with all of you yesterday, I think, in an email that had the inspection reports for a number of these places. My response back to Rido when I saw it is I don't think it's complete. And I know it's not complete. So they're looking at as to why it's not complete. But as to this one particular place that I reached out to them on and said, I believe it's a problem through anecdotal information. They went and inspected it and they recognize it's a problem. And I think consistent with what the governor said on a press conference today, that's it. No more excuses, no more chances. And that's the way I feel with one or two of the places as well that I'm aware of. No more excuses, no more.
So are we shutting them down?
I'm sorry?
Are we shutting them down?
I want to get the information from Rido on their inspections. I want a clear explanation as to what to happen. We're not shutting them down yet, but I'm not going to deal with it any longer. I think the city administration, the police department, my discussions with the solicitor, we're tired of it. So, and if they're listening tonight, you know, you're a problem.
It's so unfair to those restaurants who are playing by the rules. You know, they're not only, they don't have the same crowds, they're not making the same revenue. And if patrons are experiencing other locations where, the rules are a little more lax, you know, then those restaurants that are playing by the rules are likely to get.
It's a very, very, very small minority.
Yeah.
They are, they're playing by the rules because they know the seriousness of this.
Yeah.
You know, just by analogy, Block Island had one of their seasonal workers test, and that's a concern. You know, that's an example. I hope it's their example and not our example. And that's why it's important. I think the restaurant workers. I think that's a real important thing to happen, and I'm going to keep pushing that and insisting on that because the idea was the industry themselves, the hospitality industry, the Chamber of Commerce, and I think it's a great idea.
Joe, can I just mention nationally, they're saying in Florida, the average age of the ones that have gotten coronavirus, 34. And I think the messaging probably has been wrong from the start nationally because there are lingering medical problems that these people have, young people have after getting corona. So
You don't want to get me started on the national messaging. I think that's a terrible, that's a conversation we're going to have. And I, knowing the attitude of many of you, I rant that we're going to go on for a while because it's leadership starts at the top. We know that.
Joe? Just in terms of, so we had talked about, I know Jamie had brought up about the concept about testing sites.
Yes.
And I know that the governor made the announcement today that there would be some kind of like conditions in which people could skirt around self-quarantining. And one of those being either they are going to get tested 72 hours before coming here, or that they could come to Rhode Island and get a test here, but then have to self-quarantine until their results are in. I know that was today, but I think just going forward, I would want to see what kind of plan we would have for that, because
Plan for what though?
if the governor's instructing visitors who are coming out of state that they can go to any test site, I have to assume that we have to be prepared for something like that too.
Well, they have to pay out of pocket too, so I think some places are going to welcome those visits.
That's right.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, the tests, those test sites are online where people can go and get those things done. You know, we don't control, you know, we can facilitate, we can help, but we don't control the Rhode Island Department of Health selection of test sites.
Well, I think the concern would be if we got like a steep increase in the number of people locally who are looking to get tested, how we would deal with that.
Yeah, or, you know, again, for the visitors.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Also, too, I'm thinking, you know, the further the distance from a test site, what are the chances that somebody's going to be compliant towards that?
Oh, you know, we know what the quarantine, you know, I'm not sure we should, this is a tough discussion. The quarantine issues and the enforceability of it, we know where that went in terms of when people from Massachusetts were supposed to be quarantined, but every license plate was Massachusetts here on the island. Those are difficult issues. And I don't know the answer to the availability of, you know, test sites and whether they're slammed or whether they're not slammed. I mean, there were 3,800, I think the number was 3,800 yesterday that were tested. Those are good numbers for the state. I think the governor wants to test a lot more people. I don't think we're going to get slammed with those. The list, by the way, the 5%ers. That list has grown.
So I'm not saying that you would necessarily have that, but, that plan tonight. But I do think that, or I suspect that perhaps we should be maybe thinking about that, a test site, that could specifically be for visitors, in that sense. I'm thinking, but because the reality of the situation is, again, like hearing what the governor is saying. And then the other thing that I wanted to focus on is like, how are our restaurants doing in terms of making sure that we're tracking as well? So making sure that we're taking names and making.
Yeah,
sure
that's part of the inspectors. Tomorrow I will share with you, it's incomplete again, but I'll share with you the categories of inquiries that they make and what they ask the restaurants to produce. And that's one of the requirements is they take a look at your tracking system, if you will. Yeah,
So,
a couple of no's on there, but most of them were yeses that they had systems in place.
so what's occurring to me from what Angela's been saying is that if most of the states where the rates are so high right now, they're not our next door neighbors. They're people who would be more likely to be flying in. And if we can make it easy to comply, make the tests convenient.
I see.
They'll still have to pay, but make it convenient. Then if people have like rented an Airbnb and they know that they can come get tested, get their results quickly, and they can still enjoy their vacation.
I
That
see
would
what you're
be
saying.
the ideal
Yeah.
world.
I see what you're saying.
Joe, can I say something? First of all, when it comes to Airbnb, in most neighborhoods, they're not allowed. Number two, I've seen, and I've talked to most of the restaurants in my ward, they have compliance. They ask you your name, they ask you your phone number. They're keeping track, which I'm impressed with. They're doing a good job. I can tell you that a lot of the restaurants will say, if you don't have a mask, you can't come in. I think they're doing their part. I think that unless we have a different system in place where we enforce any of these things that we're talking about, it's a lot of wishful thinking, and I'm a realist. But I know Newport Hospital at the Board and Carry building in the parking lot, if people call up and if their doctors call and make an appointment, they can get in within 24 hours and get tested, and they get the result within 48 hours, the latest. And that's for people who are patients of the physicians for Newport Hospital.
So I can continue. I think I kind of punted today in that the suggestion of having an agenda for these updates was a good one, and I just didn't get to one. But I promise you on Tuesday I'll have an agenda, because I wanted to actually go through, the phase 3 guideline. What's changed, and I'm just going to make one comment about it, and then I'll close. The phase 2 guidelines with regard to restaurants, you can obviously increase capacity up to 66%, as long as you continue creating that social distance, 8-foot table edge to table edge system. The whole idea is social distancing at 6 feet. So you have 6 feet between patrons that are sitting at a table. I think the thing that, and we've yet to have, outdoor dining is still encouraged, and I think we still encourage that, though there's a little bit of an oxymoron with that, and I know we've briefly talked about it, in that entertainment is now allowed. Indoor entertainment is now allowed, with a lot of caveats on live performances, from distancing 14 feet from you and the patrons. You can reduce that to 6 feet as long as the performers wear masks and there's no one singing, which is kind of strange.
But the most important thing is, and to keep in mind, is the no mingling or congregating issue, which is a problem we had over the weekend, which the governor indicated the state had over the weekend. And that, what does that mean? It's disrespect to the social distancing guidelines. The oxymoron that I'm referring to is, and I don't know whether all of you knew this, but our outdoor dining under the agreements that we have with, and this is different than any state guidelines, under the agreements that we have with all these restaurants, the outdoor dining must cease at 10 o'clock. And no entertainment is allowed. On the other hand, the indoor dining at 66%, and I realize that that's not optimum for these places. They're operating under their norm. Some of them are operating under their normal entertainment licenses. So what does that mean? And this is an issue that has bothered me from the beginning, and it's going to bother me for a while. And that is, and I think it's apropos as to the masks during the day and the efforts we're making. You know, after a certain hour in the evening when most of us are sleeping, there's a lot of things going on that are not consistent with the reopening Rhode Island guidelines. And so I've wrestled in my own mind as to whether we should have a better discussion about that. When the emphasis should be on outdoor dining, for example, being out, you know, much more ventilation, airy places, as opposed to allowing what we normally allow under our normal circumstances of indoor, albeit it's dumbed down in terms of the numbers. I think if we're going to have a problem, that's where the problem's going to be.
Joe,
But I don't have any data to back that up, and that's why I'm trying to understand the data a little bit more, not to point a finger, but to see whether if we can work within a framework, just so we get through this thing.
I'm almost reluctant to bring this up, but the state of emergency for the city,
Yes.
I don't remember.
It's July 28th.
Okay.
Yeah, and
For some reason, I was thinking it was.
it's July 28th, and it's not going to. I'm not going to be recommending that it extend beyond that.
Well, I was thinking that it was ending today,
Yeah.
and I wanted.
No,
Are we meeting here for the COVID update on Tuesday?
that's a
or are we
great
just gonna
question.
do it through
What do you guys want to do?
I couldn't hear what you were saying.
The COVID update that we're doing on Tuesdays at 4:30, are we going to do that through Zoom or are we going to come here? I think we should do it through Zoom.
Okay, good. I do too.
Second.
Well, there's obviously I'll just make the comment about that we got some bugs we got to work out, but I think on balance, welcome back. It's important that we have this personal interaction. I think it helps in terms of the city administration's understanding and of course your interaction. So we'll work the bugs out too. So if you want to do Zoom Tuesday, that's
Can I
fine.
ask a question?
Sure.
Why do we do it on Tuesday, not Wednesday?
That's just how it evolved. I'll tell you exactly how it is, because at the very beginning of this, Jamie said Monday, and I said, no, man, I don't want to do it on Monday. Let's do it on Tuesday. And she said, okay, and we ended up doing it on
I knew you
Tuesday.
were going to blame me.
Yeah, so I'd go to Wednesday would be fine, Justin, because it gives some space.
But now people are used to Tuesday.
Oh.
COVID.
I kind of agree. I mean, I think it's fine. Tuesday is fine.
Tuesday.
Okay. That's what you want to do, or otherwise.
Yeah.
I would, before we go home, I would ask you if you would tell us, not tonight, but we need more people in the room.
Yes.
So what do you see as again, don't answer the question now. I mean, the first people to get in the room are the reporters.
Right, that's right.
Exactly.
And the second people are people that want to talk to us on issues. And,
Right.
Again, I look at the space and
Yeah.
there's a capacity here, but what can we do and what do you?
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you I've already thought about this, but if you can, you guys messed me up. I'm not going to talk about it anyways. I had some chairs out as demonstrative of 6 feet spacing, but in any event, we'll get into that. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn as council.
Second.
Motion and a second. I have to do the roll call vote per advice from the city solicitor.
Oh, no, is that who's
It's
responsible
him,
for
it's
this?
him, blame him. Counselor Segley.
Aye.
Counselor Leonard.
Aye.
Counselor McCalla.
Aye.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Aye.
Counselor Napolitano.
Aye.
Counselor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Bova. Aye. The meeting is adjourned.